Alrighty, at S-Stack this year I was very fortunate to receive the Great Lakes Hot Rods L-Body Shift Linkage kit. I think John Trotter was the first one to come up with this deal here, at least the first guy to post on the boards using not only the Heim joints, but he had the real nice quick release jobs in his kit. Now these guys are selling something similar. So we're really fortunate to be able to pick something like this up all in one big bag apparently. Looks like it's got some instructions and things in there, so we'll maybe look at those first, even though it goes against my better judgment, and figure out how this works so that it's less of an or and more of a nice shifter. Alright, here's the instructions. They're pretty weighty. I mean, there's a lot of pages, because for all the slow guys like me, they include a lot of nice pictures, which is really great, and a lot of good tips and a little bit of humor in there even. When you first pull it out of the package, it might remind you of your first divorce, and you know, that gives you an idea of just how much information they're packing in these bad lads. So good to know that they're thinking ahead for the guys like myself who like to rush into things and you know, prefer just a few pictures to get them going rather than a bunch of those words strung together, which I hear makes sense. That's a lot better than the alternative. Here are the items as they've come out of the bag. You've got some sort of a doodad over here, and some bushings in here, along with some of the little E-clips. That'll be convenient. Hopefully they're all the same size, so when I drop one in the car there and can't find it, I can go to the hardware store and get another identical size, although they do have a parts list here, and they're really good about listing the sizes and everything, so that'll be great. Even if they're not all the same, I can go back and get one from the hardware store with no issues. And then there's some assorted doodads in here, which look pretty neat, and we're going to string all these together to make some good shifting happen. Alrighty, I've got all the shift rods and the brackets and things out of the car, and I'm going to be ready to go ahead and pull the plastic ends off of the rods and get the bushings out of the brackets and things, grind off the ball studs and what have you. I gotta tell you, this was actually pretty easy to get out of the car in mine. Everything's in pretty good condition on my blue Omni here, not terribly rusty or otherwise in bad condition. Frankly, some of the steps I can't imagine having a terribly rusty car, how much more difficult that would have been to pry all these things off and what have you. But nonetheless, it's pretty good. I'm actually glad to see that the shift rods themselves aren't terribly rusty. After much grinding and hammering, a bit of drilling, and some cutting, I've got all the ball studs off of the brackets. I've got those holes drilled out so that the new pieces can go in, and I've got the ends lopped off of the rods along with all of the plastic pieces from the rods removed. I'll say that the heat gun worked phenomenally to just loosen up those plastic ball socket deals and just popped them right off. That was perfect. The only thing where I had a little bit of trouble compared to the directions was, I gotta tell you, some of those ball studs on there, it definitely took, in addition to grinding the meat on the back of it flat, I did have to go ahead and either drill or grind in just a little bit in the bracket in the very center there. Otherwise, I was just, there was no way that I was drifting those things out with a punch or anything. I had to really wail away on them with a hammer. But, you know, at the same time, I really didn't go into the brackets that much at all. I mean, frankly, I think a couple spots on the bracket on the left right there, I believe it was, I think I actually had less of a metal touch than what they even had on the instructions. So I think I did pretty well with that, and it's really not that big of a deal. I mean, it's nothing. I think all of us at one point or another have tried something like that. So to be expected, and not a huge ordeal at all, but just a little added note there. If you've been following along with the videos so far, you've probably noticed that I forgot to take the bracket off the trans. Had it all unbolted and everything. I just forgot to take it out of there and grind off the ball stud and get that ready to go. So now it's ready, and I think I finally got all the pieces all squared away, just ready to install the parts now. Been pretty hot outside the last couple days. Let me give you a little example of what I've been working with here. Um, Not the most pleasant. Got the rods all threaded and set to go there. I know they give you a few tips in the instructions, which are great, really helpful. I mean, I've drilled and tapped and run a die down stuff before, but always good for a little refresher there. Anybody that hasn't done a lot of things like that, I just recommend going really slow, especially when you start out, because you don't want to get the die cocked to one side. I went a little too fast on one of those there. I don't know if you can tell, but axially, I believe it would be. I'm just a little bit off. Nothing too crazy, but you know, I kind of like them to be perfect. And I think, honestly, I think this is the best I've ever done, with the exception of that one little mistake there. So I'm really happy and pretty proud of these. But overall, relatively easy phase. Just go slow, use a lot of cutting oil, and take your time. Well, 18 bucks and change later, and I've got myself the nice 3/4 inch drill bit that you need to go ahead and bore out the holes in the brackets a little bit. At least this thing will be around for a little while, so it's not like it's going to be a one-time thing. I'm sure I'll need it again someday. But nonetheless, 18 bucks, kind of a bummer, especially when you're as cheap as I am. Alright, I've got the bushings in, I've got the pivot ball on there, got the shafts all made up and everything. This is pretty much ready to go back on the car now. So we'll do that, and I guess it'll be time for the final report back after that. Well, it's downright cold in here today. I'll say another good tip for working on this particular project with the shift linkage. If just absolutely make sure that the rod that goes from the shifter up to the levers up there is completely free, because unfortunately, as we'll see in a bit, what you think is just that rod sticking a little bit and maybe being really difficult to move fore and aft could actually just be the pin in the trans locking it neutral, bending and then breaking off inside the transmission for a little added excitement. So we're going to try and pull that out today. If it's not sitting right on the top there, I'm going to try a neodymium magnet that I've got to try and pull it out from the bottom of the case. Hopefully that'll work. If not, out comes the transmission. Glorious times. Alright, so the first step in the process, if you ever do become so unfortunate as to break off one of these pins in the trans, you've got this inspection cover right here. There's 6 bolts, 1, 2, 3, and then 3 more on the other side, which are a little bit harder to get to, but it's still not terrible at all. Go ahead and pull those off. Obviously, first, your main priority, if you're anything like me with a lot of the cars you have, there's just 20 some odd years of gunk and junk crammed on the top of that inspection cover and around the seams. Well, you don't want that falling down in the trans, so take a little bit of time, take the 5 minutes, go ahead, clean that off, make sure that the minimal amount of junk is going to get down in there. Then we're going to go ahead and pull this off and see how we can fare. I'm going to try and take it off with the passenger side, or excuse me, the driver's side motor mount and everything in there. I think I've done that before many times on other cars, but you know, L-body's a little bit more cramped, so we'll see how that works out for us. Alright, I went ahead and pulled the battery tray over here to make it a little more visible, and it's really not terribly apparent right now, but bottom line is that I just could not get to the very back bolt back here. It was being impeded by the bracket that holds the trans to the car, and also the other ones are going to be a real pain. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is just take off the front wheel, drop the driver's side motor mount down, take off the bracket, and then I should have some pretty easy access to those bolts. Shouldn't be a huge deal, just another couple steps in retrieving this thing. Again, fingers crossed that the pin is just sitting there at the top in the inspection cover. Alright, I thought I'd show you guys just my method for taking this off if you haven't done it before. I usually use the jack on the body of the trans, not the end cover, but the actual body of it up there, and just ever so slightly lift up just to take the weight off of the motor mount bolt up there. I guess it's really the trans mount, but whatever. We go ahead and come up here, and you can see where the bracket attaches and the actual hole is for the bolt. The hole for the bolt is right here that holds the bracket up in the car, and then the one, I'm not sure what you see, 1, 2, and then the third one kind of hiding right back there. Third bolt removes the actual bracket from the trans. I generally just go ahead and remove the bolt that holds the bracket in the car, and then the bolts from the bracket to the trans, and from there it is just incredibly frustrating every time to get that bracket out, which is a bit of a downer, but nonetheless, eventually, with enough wondering if you'll ever get the bracket off the car, you end up getting there, so it ends up working out for the best. But either way, we'll see how long that takes me, and we'll be back in a bit. Alright, that didn't take anywhere near as long as I thought it would. Usually anytime I've got an L body going, I've got to basically remove all the mounts and what have you. I'm just I guess not the best at getting the motor mounts and things out of these little cars, but nonetheless, pulled the one on the left out of the car, pretty decent shape, but I've got the one on the right lying around. As you can see, it looks a little bit different. The actual insert there is one of the poly bushings units from Johnny. When I took the bracket out, I just undid the bracket, the 3 bolts, and the one that holds the bracket up to the frame rail there. But then I also undid the front motor mount and just lowered it down so the front motor mount is just sitting in the little channel bracket there that it rides in, and then pulled it right out the front. So the new one will go in just the opposite way, and we should be looking good. But the main thing is that we're going to be able to get the inspection cover off, and that's going to be what we're going after today anyway. But I guess if we can do a little upgrade like this along the way, why not? One thing I'd strongly recommend you guys do as you're pulling off the inspection cover is to make sure that you have the bolts. Either you just go ahead and remember which longer ones go where, or you go ahead and do what I did here, which is placing the bolts in order. This is if you're looking at the trans in the car, so this would be the left rearmost one if you're standing right in front of the car, going to the front, on the right side of course going to the front. Looks like these are all the original bolts, can't be too sure. Looks like these two might have originally been in the same position and this one was up here. But there's not a huge size difference on those. However, it can make a pretty big difference. I know there was one time on a 523 that I accidentally cracked the case because I wasn't paying attention and I ran one of the longer bolts into one of the shorter holes, and I was using an air ratchet at the time, so it made short work of that. I'm not sure how visible it is back there, but I did go ahead and pull off the I don't know, I guess the pivot bracket that pushes the selector in and out, and I did of course remove the shift rod from the back side of that. I've got all the bolts out now because I've got the trans mount out of there. I was able to free up the room to do that, and we should be good to go in a moment. Alright, I think we may have gotten super duper lucky here. I think that little ball in the shaft there, I think that's the pin that we're going to have to try and drive out. Now, of course, the hard part's going to be getting the pin to come out because there's not much clearance back behind there, so I'm not sure if we'll have to take this whole deal apart or how we're going to do that yet. But nonetheless, at least it's not dropped down in the trans, and our problem is solely right here. And actually, to tell you the truth, I've got a couple more of these down in the basement, but we'll go ahead and try and get this one back in there so I don't have to find and clean those up. As a testament to just how lucky I got, there's that little piece of the neutral lockout pin, and I barely touched it with a little drift punch. I mean literally just touched it, and it fell out of the hole there, and fell out into the body of the selector cover. I will say though, one thing that probably saved me, I'm not sure if the factory was thinking of this or not, but when you have it in neutral, the trans is back like this. So if you can kind of see there, that hole has got this piece around it here. So that's actually what allowed me to get really lucky and retain the piece. So it was actually kind of locked in neutral this way, and I had to kind of jimmy it around a little bit to get it out, but very lucky indeed. So at least I'm not fishing for that piece in the bottom of a transmission. Back on it goes with a little bit of RTV, get the new motor mount in, and hopefully pull the that offending rod out of there, the rod that goes from the shifter to the other pieces up front, get that out, get it freed up, make my adjustment, and I'll be good to go. I just wanted to make sure when I pointed out, or that I pointed out earlier, that when you're working with this bolt right here, you want to make sure you're using a deep well socket. And this bolt, if you can't guess just by looking at it, is the one that goes through the driver's side mount on the trans there. If you don't use it, you're going to end up inevitably pulling off the smaller socket inside the frame rail there. And I've lost a couple of them that way in the junkyard, things like that. It's just really difficult to get them out. So go ahead and use the deep well every time, and you won't have any problems. Alright, since I broke the neutral lock pin or what have you, went ahead and just pulled out the 1/8 inch Allen wrench out of this set here. Stuck it right down in there. Seems to fit fairly well, so I'm just going to stick with that rather than trying to search a new one out in the basement. It'll be a little bit easier. Alright, here's the offending piece that caused us so much trouble. Finally got it off of the car. You can see it's pretty rusty there, I mean, no doubt about it, but thought I had it freed up the other day. I guess I didn't. Nonetheless, whether it became seized in there again enough to where I broke the pin or what have you, we're going to go ahead and loosen it up, and then once it's nice and free, extra super free this time, we'll go ahead and throw it back on the car and be ready to adjust the shifter linkage. Alright, a few minutes worth of work, and really all I did was just tap this really lightly with a hammer after opening up the bracket a little bit, and as you can see, we have full movement now, so I'm anticipating this time I won't break my tool that I'm using to hold the trans in neutral, and the world will be a happier place with a shifter that's properly centered and adjusted. Alright, I'm going to try and show you guys the biggest problem I ran into in this entire project, and frankly made it quite frustrating. It was evident from the get-go that the kit's real high quality, everything is there, it all fits as it should, but I believe, just the instructions for mounting everything and adjusting it all are obviously made, in my opinion, at least from what I can gather, for the cars that have already been converted or are turbocharged, probably one-piece intakes or two-piece intakes, whatever. Because the problem I had, you notice in the directions it says that this spherical bearing, or what have you, it says to screw it all the way in. That was a disaster, because what happened is, the piece that's above it, which I can't get a very good shot of here, well, maybe I can, that piece right there sits just too darn far forward and will run into the EGR business up there. I'm not sure how evident that is on the video, but regardless, the link here, the arm, will actually hit the EGR tubing, and you cannot get it into the various gears. So it was necessary for me to go ahead, and I've got this just barely threaded in there. I mean, clearly enough to where nothing's going to happen. I mean, it's a shifter, so I'd break something, in the selector lever area on the trans before I broke what I've got going on in this area, clearly. However, the fact remains that it's not in there very far, as opposed to the directions say screwed all the way in. And that's fine. I mean, that's no big deal. It was something I was able to figure out. It did take me a little while, but just a little bit of thinking about how the system works and everything, and I was good to go. One thing I did, again, in an earlier part of this video, I went ahead and showed you guys that you got to really make sure that it's freed up back on the end down there where the shifter portion goes into the rod, and if you don't have that really nice and loose, this is going to be a disaster too, because I got everything set up. I had it locked in neutral. I had it locked in neutral, and then there we go, locked in neutral, all the arms adjusted, all the linkages to where it was the way it should be, pretty much as they describe in the instructions. And then from there, I just spaced this back all the way so that I have enough clearance up at the top. And at that point, obviously, the shifter was way too far forward. So I was able to just loosen it up back there on the nut, and then slowly but surely work that shifter side to side while giving it a little bit rearward pressure to get the shifter approximately where it should be in the neutral position. Then I went ahead and locked it up back there. That was the last thing I did. The instructions in the factory service manuals, if any of you guys rely on those, they're an absolute joke. The talk about some isolator deal and what have you, and of course I don't even have that on the car anymore. I don't know how long it lasted, but regardless, that wasn't a possibility, and since you've just made so many adjustment points that from the factory aren't there, there's a little bit of fine tuning, and that's to be expected. But if I would have known about this one thing, and who knows, maybe it's posted somewhere or what have you, maybe I misread the directions, and I'll find that out later. But regardless, I believe it did say to go ahead and thread that in all the way. And instead, if you've got a carved GLH for sure, you want to barely thread it in so that way you're not running into the EGR tube. And who knows, I mean, maybe it's like that on the turbo cars too. I'm not sure the difference between the routing. Another thing I would add actually is in the directions, and I'm not sure if this is the case, but if you look at the severe angle forward that the ball stud up there is placed at, it looks like the arm in the directions is more vertical, and I'm wondering if that's a turbo car difference too. So obviously if that one in the directions is more straight up, you're going to be spaced a lot farther back, so they could have threaded that all the way in and they would have been fine. Frankly, that would have been necessary. But interesting question to see, how many differences are there in the linkage between the carb GLH and the regular GLH and Shelby Chargers. But clearly here a little bit different situation going on, and now that I've got it going, I think it's going to be really nice. I mean, I've already felt it, shifted it through the gears, and it feels good. But nonetheless, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. All right, I've got the gear shifter all set up now. It's all adjusted, working really well. I know that my problem originally there was just the fact that there's a difference between the carb cars and the turbo cars as far as the shifter linkage and everything. More than just having one bend in the rod, I believe, I haven't found out for sure yet, but I believe that the rod that runs from the actual shifter itself up forward to the other bracket and the other rod up there, I believe that it's at a different angle. I believe the turbo cars had the rod placed on one side of it, while the carbed cars had it placed on another. But regardless, I'm really happy with it so far. I mean, go ahead and get through all the gears, no problems here. Feels way better than it did before. I can definitely see now why all the guys say that they like the rod shifter so much. I mean, I'll be frank, I'm still probably a bigger fan of the cable shifted cars, but at the same time, when you've got a nice tight rod shifter going, that's really something to enjoy. And hopefully I can get all the garbage cleaned up out of my car so it won't be as embarrassing in further videos.